The world number one just opened his mouth before the biggest tournament of the season, and the golf world hasn't stopped talking since. Scottie Scheffler is supposed to be the composed one, the calm Texan who never lets emotions get the better of him. But something has changed, and his recent comments have exposed a side of him that fans rarely see. First, he called a reporter's question terrible and awful at the Masters after shooting a 7-under 65. Then, he blasted the PGA Championship's pin placements as the hardest I've seen since I've been on tour. Now, with the US Open at Shinnecock Hills looming, everyone is asking the same question. Is Scottie Scheffler cracking under pressure? Or is he just telling the truth while everyone else stays silent? The debate has split the golf world right down the middle. Some call him honest, others call him a bad loser. One thing is certain. The US Open controversy has already begun, and Scheffler hasn't even hit his first tee shot yet. Welcome to Golf Untold. Today, we're breaking down everything Scottie Scheffler said, why it sparked a massive debate, and what it means for his pursuit of the career Grand Slam.
To understand why the golf world is buzzing about Scottie Scheffler right now, you need to go back to April at Augusta National, the Masters, the tournament where legends are made and careers are defined. Scheffler was hunting his third green jacket, and after a slow start, he delivered something special on Saturday. He shot a 7-under 65, 7 birdies, an eagle, a round so good that it vaulted him from the middle of the pack right back into contention. Any other player would have been glowing. Any other player would have been grateful for the questions. But Scottie Scheffler isn't any other player. After the round, a reporter asked him what felt like an innocent question. "Scottie, that was a 65 today. What did it feel like it could have or should have been?" What happened next stunned everyone in the room. Scheffler didn't smile. He didn't give the usual athlete non-answer. He looked at the reporter and said, "That's just a terrible question. Next question." And then, just to make sure everyone heard him, he added, "Awful." He laughed it off afterward, but the damage was done. The clip spread across social media like wildfire. Within hours, the golf world was divided into two camps, those who thought Scheffler was being honest and those who thought he was being a jerk. The comments on X were brutal. One fan wrote, "He can be such a big baby. Just say I left a few out there and move on." Another called him a doucher and said he had the charisma of a peanut. But there were defenders too. "He was not joking. He shot 65 at Augusta. It's a dumb question," one commenter argued. "Sure, he could have made another putt or two, but again, he shot 65. Here's what makes this incident so fascinating. Just minutes before that press conference, Scheffler had done a TV interview with CBS. In that interview, he said he felt he did a lot of good things on the back nine, but didn't feel he got the reward he was hoping for. So when a reporter asked essentially the same question, what could the round have been, Scheffler was already frustrated. He had already answered it. He didn't want to answer it again. But here's the thing. That's what press conferences are. Reporters ask questions. Sometimes they ask questions you've already answered. Sometimes they ask questions you think are dumb. But most professionals handle it with grace. Scheffler didn't. The incident raised a bigger question that nobody was asking out loud. Is Scottie Scheffler turning into someone different? The guy who used to be the most boring interview in golf, the one who gave nothing but cliches and talked about how he was just trying to hit good shots, was suddenly showing teeth. And not everyone liked what they saw. His college coach at Texas, John Fields, once said something that has stuck with me. When asked about Scheffler's competitive drive, Fields said, "It's still there, and it's never, ever going to leave." He was talking about the rage, the anger, the inability to accept anything less than perfection. And that anger, which used to come out only on the course, was now spilling into press conferences. But the Masters incident was just the beginning. A few weeks later at the PGA Championship, Scheffler would say something that made his terrible question comment look like a polite disagreement. And that's when the US Open controversy really started to take shape.
May 2026, Aronimink Golf Club, the PGA Championship, and Scottie Scheffler was not happy. Let me set the scene for you. The course was playing brutally hard. The pins were tucked in corners that seemed designed to punish, not to reward. Players were taking 6 hours to complete their rounds. 6 hours, because every shot required so much deliberation. The scores were hovering around par, which is exactly what major championship organizers want, but exactly what players hate.
Scheffler started the second round in a 7-way tie for the lead at 3 under. By the time he walked off the course, he had signed for a 1 over 71 and was 4 shots back. And when he got to the microphone, he didn't hold back. "This is the hardest set of pin locations that I've seen since I've been on tour, and that includes US Opens. That includes Oakmont," Scheffler said. Let me translate that for you. Oakmont is widely considered one of the toughest golf courses in America. It's hosted 9 US Opens. It's a beast. And Scheffler was saying that Aronimink's pins were harder than anything he'd seen at Oakmont. He went further. Most of the pins today were, kind of absurd. They were just so far into the areas where we thought the pins were going to be. Then he gave a specific example that made everyone's jaw drop. The one on 14 was probably the hardest pin that I've seen in a long time, just because there's literally just like a spine, and they're like, "Oh, we'll just put the pin right on top of it." And you're like, "All right, well, I'll see what I can do." Absurd. That was the word he chose. Not challenging, not difficult. Absurd, as in ridiculous, as in unreasonable, as in the tournament organizers had gone too far. And here's where the controversy really exploded. Justin Rose, the 2013 US Open winner, heard what Scheffler said, and he disagreed, publicly. Speaking after his third round, Rose was asked about Scheffler's comments. His response was measured but clear. "I had bigger problems to worry about. I was just trying to get my game going, and maybe didn't notice how difficult the flags were." Then Rose made an observation that cut right to the heart of the debate. You can't have it both ways, I guess. You can't have 40-yard wide fairways and middle of the green pins. Think about what Rose is saying there. If the fairways are wide, and Aronimink's fairways were generous, then the pins have to be tough. Otherwise, the scoring would be too low, and the tournament wouldn't feel like a major. It's a trade-off, and Rose seemed to be suggesting that Scheffler wanted it both ways, easy fairways and easy pins, which, in Rose's polite British way, was a criticism. Rose also revealed something interesting about the pin placements. He said they had been pretty planned out, and that you could see where the pins were going to be by looking for little dots out on the green. In other words, this wasn't a surprise. The players knew what they were getting into. Scheffler just didn't like it. The contrast between the two players was striking. Scheffler, the fiery competitor who wears his frustrations on his sleeve. Rose, the veteran who takes what the course gives him and doesn't complain. And the golf world noticed. But here's what nobody was talking about. Despite his complaints, Scheffler was still in contention. He was 2 under for the tournament, tied for 9th place, just 2 shots off the lead. He was complaining about the course while sitting in the top 10. That bothered some people. It felt like a lack of self-awareness, like a rich man complaining about the price of bread. Others saw it differently. They saw a competitor who holds himself to such a high standard that any obstacle feels like an injustice. They saw a perfectionist who can't accept that the game is supposed to be hard, even for the best player in the world. And then, just when the debate about Scheffler's attitude was starting to die down, he did something that poured gasoline on the fire. He made a comment about success that made everyone stop and think. And Matt Fitzpatrick, of all people, was the one who made sure nobody forgot it.
Before we get to the US Open controversy, the one that has everyone talking about Shinnecock Hills, we need to talk about something Scheffler said last summer, because it explains everything about who he is and why he reacts the way he does. July 2025, Royal Portrush, the Open Championship. Scheffler was sitting in a pre-tournament press conference, and someone asked him about winning. What he said next was so honest, so raw, that it stuck with one of his competitors for an entire year. "Winning only lasts a few minutes, that kind of euphoric feeling," Scheffler said. He used his victory at the Byron Nelson as an example. He had worked his whole life to win that tournament at home. He celebrated, he hugged his family, his sister was there. And then, it's like, okay, what are we going to eat for dinner? Life goes on. He called professional sports a really weird thing to do. All that effort, all the work, all those hours on the range, all those early mornings, all that sacrifice for something that feels amazing for maybe 15 minutes. And then you're hungry, and you need to figure out dinner, and the trophy sits on a shelf while life continues. Matt Fitzpatrick heard those words, and he never forgot them. Speaking ahead of the 2026 PGA Championship, Fitzpatrick explained why Scheffler's comments hit him so hard. "Scottie's words really stuck with me because I was very intent on saying, well, okay, if I'm lucky enough to win again, that I take it in, I enjoy it, I really think about it and enjoy it with the people that it means something to, as well as myself." After listening to Scheffler, Fitzpatrick promised himself something simple. The next time success came around, he wouldn't let it slip past him. He'd slow down, he'd soak it in, he'd share it with the people who matter. And then, not long after, the wins started coming. Think about the irony here.
Scottie Scheffler, the man who seems frustrated and angry on the course, the man who snaps at reporters and calls pin placements absurd, is also the man who understands the emptiness of victory better than almost anyone. He knows that the trophies don't fulfill you. He knows that the wins don't make you whole. He knows that at the end of the day, you're still just a person who needs to figure out what's for dinner. That's the contradiction at the heart of Scottie Scheffler. He's driven to win, pathologically, obsessively driven. But he also knows that winning doesn't actually solve anything. So what does he do with that tension? He channels it into frustration, into anger, into snapping at reporters when they ask questions he thinks are stupid. It's not an excuse, but it is an explanation. And as the US Open at Shinnecock Hills approaches, that tension is only going to get worse, because Scheffler has one thing left to chase, the one accomplishment that would silence every critic and cement his legacy forever, the career Grand Slam. He's already won the Masters, twice. He's won the PGA Championship. He's won the Open Championship. The only major missing from his resume is the US Open, and Shinnecock Hills is the next opportunity. But here's the problem. The US Open is supposed to be the toughest test in golf. The USGA is famous for setting up courses that punish every mistake, that expose every weakness, that make the best players in the world look ordinary. And Scottie Scheffler has a weakness right now, a big one, and everyone is talking about it.
Let me tell you about the elephant in the room. The thing that nobody at the PGA Championship wanted to say out loud, but everyone could see. Scottie Scheffler's golf swing has a problem, and it's getting worse. His driver, that's the issue. Specifically, his ball flight with the driver. For years, Scheffler played a neutral ball flight, straight or a slight cut that kept him in the fairway. But this season, something has changed. That neutral flight has turned into a big fade, and not a controlled fade, a slice, the kind of shot that makes you wince when you see it leave the club face. At times, Scheffler has been aiming so far left that he actually has to hit a slice just to get the ball back into the fairway. Think about that. The best player in the world is aiming 30 yards left of his target because he knows the ball is going to move right. That's not a strategy. This is where the golf world splits into two, and I want to walk you through both sides of the argument, because honestly, I think both sides have a point. On one side, you have the people who defend Scheffler. They argue that he's one of the most honest athletes in professional sports. When he's asked a question, he answers it truthfully, even if the truth isn't pretty. He doesn't give you the PR-approved non-answer that most athletes memorize. He tells you what he actually thinks. The pin placements at Aronimink were absurd. He said so, and a lot of players agreed with him privately. They just didn't have the courage to say it publicly. The reporter's question at the Masters was terrible. He'd already answered it in the TV interview. Why should he have to answer it again? This side also points out that Scheffler always shows up. He doesn't skip press conferences. He doesn't hide after bad rounds. He stands at the microphone and takes the questions, even when he's frustrated. That should count for something. And then there's the deeper argument, the one that cuts to the heart of who Scheffler is as a competitor. His college coach told The Athletic that Scheffler's competitive drive is pathological, on the Michael Jordan end of the spectrum. Jordan was famously awful to the media. He was famously awful to his teammates. He was famously awful to anyone who got in the way of winning. But we don't call Jordan a bad loser. We call him the greatest competitor of all time. So why is Scheffler treated differently? Because he's not as charismatic as Jordan? Because he doesn't have the same marketing machine behind him? Or because we expect golfers to be polite, to be gracious, to say the course won instead of admitting that they're frustrated? On the other side, you have the people who are tired of Scheffler's attitude. They argue that there's a difference between honesty and rudeness. The reporter at the Masters wasn't attacking Scheffler. He was asking a reasonable question about a great round, and Scheffler called it terrible and awful in front of the entire room. That's not honesty. That's being a jerk. The same goes for his comments about the pins at Aronimink. Yes, they were hard. That's the point of a major championship. Players like Justin Rose managed to keep their mouths shut and just play. Why couldn't Scheffler? This side also points out that Scheffler's complaints ring hollow when you look at the leaderboard. He was 2 shots off the lead when he called the pins absurd. He was in contention. He had a chance to win. So what was he complaining about? That the tournament wasn't easy enough for him? The word that keeps coming up is entitlement. Some fans feel like Scheffler has become entitled, like he expects the courses to be set up for him, like he thinks he deserves to win just because he's the world number one. And when he doesn't win, he looks for someone else to blame.
I've watched the clip of his terrible question response about 20 times now, and here's what I keep coming back to. He laughed afterward. He knew he had been rude, but he didn't apologize, he didn't walk it back, he just laughed and moved on. That's the part that bothers people. Not the frustration, every competitor gets frustrated, but the refusal to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, he was out of line. And yet, isn't that exactly what we want from our athletes? Not the rudeness, but the authenticity, the willingness to be imperfect, the willingness to be human. We say we want athletes to be real, but when they're real in ways we don't like, when they're angry or dismissive or petulant, we punish them for it. We can't have it both ways. Either we want the PR robots or we want the truth. Scottie Scheffler gives us the truth, and sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. That's a Band-Aid. The problem has been masked recently because the courses have been soft. At TPC Craig Ranch in Dallas, where Scheffler played before the PGA Championship, the fairways were wet and slow. The ball wasn't rolling into trouble. But Shinnecock Hills? Shinnecock is going to be firm, fast, the kind of course where a ball that lands in the fairway can roll into the rough if you're not careful. And if Scheffler is hitting slices, he's going to be in the trees, a lot. This isn't just my observation. The statistics back it up. Scheffler's driving and iron play have been nowhere near as precise as they usually are. His putting has been streaky. And his first-round scoring issues, the slow starts that force him to play catch-up, have been well documented. And yet, despite all of this, Scheffler has still recorded 3 runner-up finishes and 6 top 5s this season. That's the thing about being the best player in the world. Even when you're broken, you're still better than almost everyone else. But the US Open is different. The US Open exposes flaws. The US Open punishes players who aren't at their best. And if Scheffler shows up to Shinnecock with a slice that he can't control, he's not going to win. He might not even contend. That brings us back to his comments. The absurd pins, the terrible question, the frustration that seems to be bubbling just beneath the surface. Is Scheffler angry because the courses are unfairly hard? Or is he angry because he knows he's not playing well enough to win on fair courses, and he's looking for something else to blame? The answer matters, because the US Open isn't going to be fair. It's never fair. That's the point. The USGA sets up courses to test every aspect of a player's game, mental, physical, emotional. And right now, Scottie Scheffler is failing the emotional test. His college coach was right. The fire is still there. The rage is still there. But that rage, which used to be a weapon, is starting to look like a liability.
So here we are, June 2026, Shinnecock Hills, the US Open. And Scottie Scheffler is walking into the most pressure-packed tournament of his career with a slice he can't control, a reputation for complaining about course setups, and the weight of a career Grand Slam on his shoulders. What happens next? If Scheffler wins, all of this goes away. The terrible question comment becomes a footnote. The absurd pins complaint becomes a funny story about how he overcame adversity. The slice becomes a minor issue that he fixed just in time. That's how sports work. Winning cures everything. But if Scheffler loses, if he struggles at Shinnecock, if the slice puts him in the trees, if the frustration boils over, if he snaps at another reporter or complains about another setup, the narrative will shift. He won't be the honest competitor anymore. He'll be the bad loser who couldn't handle the pressure. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Scottie Scheffler is a generational talent who happens to be going through a difficult stretch. He's frustrated because he knows he's not playing his best, and sometimes that frustration comes out in ways that aren't pretty. But here's what I keep thinking about. That comment about winning only lasting a few minutes, about how the euphoric feeling fades, and then you're just hungry and trying to figure out dinner. That wasn't frustration talking. That was wisdom. That was the perspective of someone who has achieved everything and realized that the trophies don't fill the void. Matt Fitzpatrick heard those words and changed his approach to success. He started savoring his wins instead of rushing past them. He started sharing the moments with the people who mattered. He became a better player because of what Scottie Scheffler said. So maybe the real Scottie Scheffler isn't the guy who snaps at reporters or complains about pins. Maybe the real Scottie Scheffler is the guy who understands, better than almost anyone, that winning isn't actually the point. The point is the pursuit. The point is the battle. The point is testing yourself against the best in the world on the toughest courses. The US Open at Shinnecock Hills is the ultimate test, and Scottie Scheffler, for all his flaws and frustrations, is still the best player in the world.
He still has a chance to complete the career Grand Slam. He still has a chance to silence his critics and prove that the fire, the rage, the competitiveness, the refusal to accept anything less than perfection is still a weapon, not a weakness. Was his terrible question response a sign of a champion cracking under pressure, or was it the frustrated honesty of a perfectionist who holds himself to standards that most of us can't comprehend? And here's the question that will follow him all the way to Shinnecock. When Scottie Scheffler steps onto the first tee at the US Open, will the fire in his belly be enough to overcome the flaws in his game? We're about to find out. And honestly, I can't wait to watch.